Okay. Hi, my name is Kathy Sabedo. I'm a mortgage planner and I'm a proud veteran. I'm here with some guests today to discuss their success, although we're in this pandemic, and how they're managing their families, their time, their money, and their future plans as we move to the next step. I have Patricia, hey Patricia, Teresa, Nolan, Judson, Jean, and Viveka. So basically, we just wanted you to share your story about, where you're at now and how you're planning to manage everything between now and when we get back to work. Anybody want to start? Because this is your success story.
Happy Monday.
Okay. Happy Monday.
Yeah.
So I guess I'll go first because I was telling Teresa, I mean telling Patricia, I feel like I'm the poster child of mistakes. So we and I consider myself a late bloomer because I didn't graduate from college till 2000, and then about I guess 6 years later, my sister and I purchased our house, and so we were kind of, I would say, not in a desperate situation, but we just wanted to buy property. So that's what we did.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, we didn't choose the right financial way to get our house financed, but we got our house anyway.
Mm-hmm.
And we've been, holding on. But I must admit that only God made it able for us to purchase our house, because right after I purchased my house, I was fired from my job and didn't know where money was going to come in, only unemployment, a little part-time work, and God made it possible for me to make it through. And so from that, I pretty much, learned lessons along the way. I read this book, and I meant to try to find it because it's a perfect book for a time such as this, because it's about ebbs and flows and preparing for the future. Like once you make that mistake, what are you going to do next time not to make the same mistake? So I kind of learned from that. And then God just put on my heart last year, well, he put on my heart before, but last year I really listened to just really start watching how I spend money and being more careful, because I like to shop. So it was like, I didn't want to pray that shopping spirit out of me, but I had to in order to save some money. And God did. He took it away from me, basically. So I don't have that desire to shop as much. I know how to pull back, or God taught me how to pull back, but only God has gotten me through what I've gotten through as far as being able to sustain my part of the mortgage. And let me share this one quick story. So when I got fired from my job, I had worked on this grant, and I had a different grant at a different church. And, I had billed them. I was an independent contractor. So I had been, billed them, and I knew that it was money left, but I was like, I didn't use the money. So, I never went after that money. I could have. And so here I am struggling for money, and my sister saying everything is going to be okay. We're going to make it. And all of a sudden in the mail, I get a check for like $5,000. And it was the balance of what was owed to me from that grant that I was like, that's their money. It was a church. They'll use it for good, to keep their programs going. And it was from a pretty big church. It's really, big in the community. And I was just that right there just let me know God was like telling me, stop worrying about all this stuff that you worry about. I got you. You don't have to worry. So with the pandemic, it was the same thing. Initially, I was like a little because I have anxiety. I found out I suffer from anxiety, but I don't need drugs for it. And God just said, I got this. You don't have to worry. You're going to be okay. And your job is to encourage others that don't feel like they're okay. Let them know what I brought you through so that they can, to help them get through this. So that's kind of what I've been trying to do, is just stay positive. When I get discouraged, I just say, mustard seed faith, Lord, mustard seed faith. That's all I need is mustard seed faith. And I just keep going from there. So only God, and I praise God for it, for that every day.
Nolan?
Yeah, I want to thank Pat for including me on this Zoom conference we had yesterday. I'm trying to look up the young lady's name that we talked to. What's her name, Pat?
Antoinette Moran.
Antoinette. That's right. And she gave me a lot of insight and just reminders of how money works. And we had over an hour discussion, Pat and Antoinette, about just the importance of financial education and generational wealth and credit and finances and just a whole lot of stuff about just how money works. And it was a lot of insight, and it was a very insightful Saturday morning. And I want to thank Patricia for including me on that. We're going to follow up next week. And Pat also brought me a book about how money works. And I'm going to dedicate it to my daughter. She's 15, and hopefully she can get what I got at 30 at the age of 15. So I've been thinking about that all weekend and how important that is, and it's how blessed I am to have friends like Patricia that remind me about financial freedom, financial education. So thank you, Patricia, for that.
You're very welcome. And you know who else has just come in? Patricia Williams, and she's on a tight schedule. Can we slip her in?
Yes, can we can. You can unmute yourself, Patricia.
You got to unmute, Patricia. PW. You're still muted. You got to unmute. I think you can unmute.
There we go. I got
There
it.
you go.
I got it. Sorry about that. I'm just talking. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
Hi. It's good to see everybody. Patricia asked me to come in and just share some insight that I have about money and property ownership and stuff. I was actually fortunate in that my mother had an idea that you had to own property. She was my first mentor. And so if I'm going to talk about something, I'm going to talk a little bit for those who may listen, is mentors and information, how acquiring information, whether it's through books or mentors or the newspaper. This is a short story I want to share. His name was Robert Bruss, B-R-U-S-S. He wrote the real estate column for the LA Times until he died in about 2007. Right before he died, he died of cancer. He really began to talk about how, frankly, the real estate bubble will not last. In every other column, he was saying that. He was saying, not only will it not last, but this is what'll happen. And he more or less nailed it. And I had been reading his column for as long as I started reading the LA Times. And I was reading his column. He was saying, don't borrow that money out of your equity because this bubble cannot last. Don't get those crazy loans. He was definitely against timeshares. Don't buy a timeshare. I was reading his column and I was just learning this stuff and other stuff I had already known. I knew how to buy a house because my mom had bought property and I would go with her and sign. And so that's one thing I think is that you should go with somebody who is buying a house before you buy your house. Go with somebody who is. Just ask them, can I come along and observe the process? The good real estate agents, like Pat, they will explain the process to you, but some of us are you know, visual learners, we've got to go and see it, you know. And if that's the kind of learner you are, just if you know somebody that's buying a house, or if your real estate friend will take you in, you know, will go and let you observe, do it first before you buy your house, so then that you know what to do. I knew what to do when the time came, because my mom used to take me when she would buy a piece of property. But I also, I want to piggyback on books and learning, real estate books, um, Rich Man, Poor Man, Rich Man, Poor Man. Somebody told me once about that book a long time ago, but I just read it recently. I just read it a little while ago, but it was a
Robert
lot of,
Kiyosaki.
huh?
Robert Kiyosaki.
Yes, yes, Rich Man, Poor Man. And like you said, teach your children. Let's if we can't, if we didn't get any, let's get some generational wealth I'm talking about, and let's start it by educating our children. I think we miss a lot by not telling our children what's going on with money. You know, if take your children. When I went to buy the house that I bought at auction, I took my granddaughter with me. My granddaughter went with me when I bought that house. And so you take your children to these things that you're doing, like my mother did me, and that will teach it. And that will be, that, in my opinion, can be the start of generational wealth. That can be the start. You can, if we're not there quite there yet, we can start it. We can start it with our grandchildren and our children. And I really believe in that. Something else, meetings. I'm thinking now that we should have family meetings. Your kids should know what's going on with you financially, good or bad.
Well, they say it takes 3 generations to create wealth, and they also say, you know, a tree, you have to, once you plant a tree, you know, the people that get to sit in the shade are the next generation. So you got to plant the tree first in order for the next generation to appreciate the shade. You know what I mean?
That's exactly right. That's exactly right. You got, and but they have to learn. I mean, the second generation, if it's the third generation that inherits or gets it, the second generation has to be taught what to do, for sure. So I don't think it's too late. I think between my mother and Robert Bruss, because by the time when I was really reading Robert Bruss every day, my mother had died. But between my mother and Robert Bruss, read the financial section. This is the last thing I'm gonna say. Read the financial section of some newspaper or magazine or whatever. There are still columnists in the LA Times and in AARP magazine that teach us stuff, and read them regularly, read them all the time, and take notes, or cut out the article and save it for reading later. I'm all about financial education. We need to really be educating ourselves and the young people in our families. And that's really like kind of all I have to say, unless somebody has a question.
That's good. Thank you, Patricia. Judson, you want to type in?
Well, couple things. Currently, I got a pension and Social Security and a paid off house, so that helps me financially. I guess this is all a result of, I guess I planned this. I planned for this to happen. It wasn't a mistake. It wasn't by error. I followed some disciplines, and I now use that as advice to younger people. And I know I kind of have a lecture with people that I know that graduate and younger people, and I tell them 3 simple things, and you can use this if you want. I say maximize your 401k at work. I tell them don't carry a balance on your credit card. Never carry a balance on your credit card.
Never.
And the third thing I say is stay out of Nick's check cashing. That's the 3 things that I say. And I think in this society, and I kind of have a little story that I tell. I tell a young person that, let's say you go to a store and you buy a watch for $100, or you see a watch and you say, how much does that watch cost? And the salesperson says, it costs $100. And I tell the young person, would you tell the salesperson, I don't want to pay 100 for it. I want to pay 150 for it. And the salesperson kind of looks at him crazy, like, why would you want to pay 150 for it? And the answer is, well, if I get my first, if I buy this on credit and my first statement says I can pay $10 a month, by the time I paid it off, I paid $150 for this watch. And that's the trap that a lot of people fall into, not understanding that, ooh, $10 a month, that's not bad. But what started off as a $100 watch turned into a $150 watch. And then, as we all know, everybody's had, or there's a potential of getting into credit trouble and not getting out of credit trouble. Then that affects your credit score, and that affects your opportunity to get a loan or to buy a house. So I try to get to a point in my life that I started paying for big purchases with cash. Probably long time ago. I remember the car that I bought with cash, and I've never bought a car without paying cash for it. So I never had a loan. I remember I doubled up my house payments at one point in time to finish that. And I kind of did everything that American capitalism society didn't want me to do. And there's a lot of things that people don't tell you, like maximize. Well, why would I want to put money into a 401k? I'll never see that. Well, that money sometimes is matched by your employer. Some companies offer stock at a discount, and that's priceless. I don't know. I'm not
So
sure.
Justin,
We're never
Justin,
told. We're never
Justin, I got a
told
question.
things like this. Go ahead.
So do you think it's better to pay your house off or to like put money out and
Never,
invest
never,
in?
never, 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 never take equity out of your house. Never,
Really?
unless you're in dire straits. I never plan. You have to understand that mortgages are one of the worst investments you could ever make, because when you have a mortgage note, probably 1% of it on your first payment goes to the principal, and 99% of it is interest. And then the second year, it's 2% principal and 98% interest. And the last payment of your mortgage 30 years later is 99%, just the opposite. So guess who's making money all this time off of your interest?
But
Right?
but do you think that do you pay less taxes if your house doesn't pay off, and can't you invest in more
No,
property?
you're always going to pay interest.
If you
You're always going to pay tax on your house, no matter what you owe on it. You always pay to the county, your county tax, no matter what you owe on it. Now, one of the disadvantages of what I just said is that you can't write off your payment, your interest. And I don't even know if that's still available. I have no idea, because it's been so long since I've had a house note, and it's been so long that I haven't been able to write it off. I really don't know if that's there anymore. I know the IRS has changed things over the years to take away what's deductible over the years. And
I'd interject and say each person has different sets of goals, right? So if your goal is to pay off your house, I believe 34% of homeowners have no mortgage on their homes. So they've created a plan or developed a plan to make sure that they didn't have a mortgage payment. And each person's strategy is different, right? Because some people, like you're saying, Nolan, if I'm paying a mortgage, then I can write off the interest, right? Or if I take cash out and I'm going to generate income by investing in another property, then that's making your money work for you. So everybody can have a different plan and a different strategy. That just depends on what you want to achieve, right? And hopefully, if your house is paid off and being a homeowner, you also have a trust, right? Because that brings about
Yeah,
a
yeah.
certain level
So
of
my whole I've heard both sides, and my whole mentality is that like if you pay off your house, like you can be using that. That's just like, you know, you got a credit card, you have zero interest, and like my Amazon account, I have zero
Don't
interest
work
now.
that way.
Like, excuse me,
no, his
Don't
credit.
work that way.
Well, what we
Okay,
basically
but
do is talk about some success stories. So we can talk about strategies different, at another time. But this goal was to say, hey, I'm a homeowner. This is the plan that I created for myself, and fortunate, through this pandemic, I'm able to sustain myself and my family. So that's really what the goal is of today. But I would love to have another conversation to talk about this because it's a different side of the coin, right? Hey, Gene, would you
yeah,
like?
I just want to know both sides of the story. You know, I'm
okay,
hearing
can
this.
I chime in on that?
Well, I want to hear somebody that has the knowledge about real estate.
At the time when the crash came, the one piece of property I had was paid for. It was paid. Because I was reading the paper and finding out that the crash had happened and houses were now being repossessed. Repossessed, is that the word? Yeah. And not the word, but anyway, and that you could get a house for a very good deal, but you had to have cash. You had to have cash. I didn't have any cash, but I had a whole house full of equity. So I did pull money out and go to the auction and buy a house. And then I divided the note. I paid, I pretty much paid cash for the house, but then now I had a note. So I divided the note between the two houses, and I still have very, very good equity in my property. So everything is relevant to what your personal story is. My personal story was that my other son needed a house to live in. That was my personal story. So now I have two pieces of property with some very good equity because I pulled money out of the paid for house. That only worked because of the crash. The house my son lives in, somebody lost. And I even now still, have sorrow in my heart for that person. But that only happened because of the crash. So every story is different, Nolan. Every story is interesting, and you just have to be aware. That's where education comes in. You have to be aware of what to do and when to do it. And that's
right.
where, yeah.
And right, it's just, I mean, this is the perfect forum for that kind of talk. So I'm thinking like, let's say you're sitting on $1 million and it's not doing nothing for you. Like the dollar doesn't really do nothing for you unless you're doing something with it. So like if you have $1 million house or 1.5 and then you pull like, 0.5 out and buy your child a house or invest in some more property. I don't know. I'm just trying to figure out what to
Well,
do.
equity is part of net worth. I mean, the bottom line is net worth. Equity in a home is part of net worth. You can, like she said, you can count it as something you have. So generational wealth is past, all it is really, generational wealth is past net worth. If I die with $1 million house, then my 1, 2, or 3 children get part of that. And they can do what they want to do to keep on creating generational wealth if they've been well educated and well encouraged. So it's not a loss not to use that if the kids are going to let the kids use it. I mean, get to a certain age where you kind of don't
Yeah,
worry about
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Okay, let's say the worst case scenario is you pass and then your kids inherit a $1.5 million house.
Now, do you
And they're
They
just
got to
sitting on that
divide it 3 ways.
1.5,
have a trust?
but maybe they can sell that house and like split it and then go invest in like some more property and get some more property,
Or buy a big car and waste it.
Yeah, that's the thing. And that's where we're talking about generational wealth. The kids have to be educated. You cannot just leave it. You're going to leave it to your kids because you love them. But and you might have one kid that as you say, is going to buy a car and go on a trip and some fancy clothes, and it's all gone.
It's gone.
But you might have that other kid that says, "Ooh, I'm worth $330,000. I think, or after taxes or whatever. I think I will take this and invest it every which way I can according to the knowledge that's in my head." That child.
But it's not really generational wealth if that next generation is not prepared, or you as the second generation doesn't set it up for them where they don't lose the money. Because that's what happened to one of my friends. I had two friends. One friend, her dad died. He left them a lot of money. But when the mother passed, she set it up where the money will remain in the family for generation to generation. So none of the kids so it will never be a time where there will not be money in that family. On the flip side, my other friend, her dad passed away, millionaire, but he didn't do that. So when the kids got the money, here they lost $1.5 million just arguing over who should get what. So in the end, out of that $1.5 million, each of them got $50,000. They lost all of that money because the dad did not set it up where they would be financially set for the rest of their lives and then for the next generation to carry it on. So you can't claim generational wealth unless you do that as that generation that has the wealth.
That's what people do. I mean, I remember a story I was watching about the Rockefellers, and there was some property that just stayed in the family. It just stayed in the family. It didn't go to any kid or anything. There was a very expensive piece of property where they could all go and hang out and live. Generational wealth can and should be some wealth that stays in the family name. It should, yeah.
So ladies, can we move on to another story? Jean, would you like to share your story?
Oh, I suppose so. My story is a little bit different. And I learned something from my mother a long time ago when I decided to buy my condominium. I said I want to buy a home. I was single, and but I was afraid. I was afraid because I thought I couldn't afford it. She gave me some good advice. She said, "You can afford more than you think you can." Just as your father and I bought our house a long time ago, there wasn't much money, coming in, but again, you had a situation where things were not as expensive as they were back then. So when you consider what you make now, etc., that you'll be able to make it without any problem. I thought about that. I really thought about that and took that to heart. So I operated on that premise. Now, another thing is that when I was saving up to buy that condo, I said, okay, I've got to put this down payment together and etc. And I remember I said, now I'm working, I'm saving, but I still need more. Well, I had a friend who's my financial advisor. We've known each other over 30 years, probably 40. Ooh, I'm getting old. Anyway, because of him, I made some investments, and I was able to pull from those investments to help with my down payment. So I felt that that was something wise that I did. So bought the place, etc. Have had it, for a lot of years now. But what I've always thought is that with property, that a person should make it work. You should make it work for you. Now, I know there are those who feel, oh no, don't ever pull a dime out of your house and don't ever do this, do that. Well, that's okay. Nothing wrong with that. That's very good. But I never thought that way. My bottom line is, if you need to do something, you need to refinance or you want to do home equity, think about it, be smart about it. But whatever you do, make sure that you can afford it. And that's what I always did, made sure that I could afford it and maintain an excellent payment record, because many of us have problems in that area. So that was always my philosophy. Now, even though I don't have any biological children, my husband has 2 wonderful children there, so I consider them mine. I share them with their mother. And they're, have been grown for quite a while, and they're self-sufficient, doing well. And I think they learned from their parents how to make money work for them. And these past few years, I've had some situations involving family matters on my husband's side of the family that caused us to have to, make some financial decisions. But I'm grateful that all that foolishness, because you know how relatives can be when somebody dies. And yeah, it was one of those kind of things. And there was a lot of ugliness involved, but I prayed over it. God saw us through it, and I will be forever grateful. And to this day, I thank him for that, because I'm not bitter. I feel just fine, because that part of my life is over. So I say that when it comes to my philosophy regarding, house property, yes, it's wonderful. And it's wonderful to be able to pay it off and, all of those great things. But again, in my case, I made it work for me because that's what I needed to do. So,
Thank you very much. Now, can we hear from Mr. Khalid? What's your philosophy, Mr. Khalid?
Well, let me just say, sorry I got here late. I just got off of work. So thank you all for accepting me. My philosophy is just basically, I think we have to learn as much as possible, our community, as far as finance and money is concerned, as far as investments, as far as learning about trust and wills and leaving our children, the proper tools that they would need if we're not around. So my goal is to always continue to educate myself, educate my children, educate my family, educate my friends on investments, on real estate, mutual funds, ETFs, the stock market, things that's going to build generational wealth for our children in our community. That's my philosophy. So right now, myself, continuing to invest in real estate. I'm always say that it's important to, earn a piece of dirt. You got to earn dirt. You got to get in the real estate game. You also have to, as the Black community, we need to learn the difference between just having our money sit in banks where it's not gaining interest versus investing into, things that's going to bring high interest to your money, to your investments. So that's basically my philosophy. And once again, sorry that I'm late. I had to work.
No,
You guys
we're
get
glad to have you. Thank
a
you
picture
for
of my
jumping
world.
in.
Thank you.
Love your story. You'll have a chance to jump in again. Let's get Teresa on the call. Teresa, what is your story?
So I've learned a lot in my time of, well, just right now, I think, with COVID, shifting priorities is something that's been good. I've been able to work remotely, but it's been nice being at home more with my family. And it's also been really great to have my own piece of property because if you own real estate, you have a say so. Whereas there are a lot of people right now that don't own, that are still getting evicted, even though there's a moratorium on evictions. There are people who are struggling with what they're going to do because they don't know where their next paycheck is going to come from. And yes, you have troubles as a homeowner, and everything ebbs and flows, and there are always going to be ups and downs, but remember that this too shall pass. And if you have your own property, at least you have some options that don't involve you having to completely rely on the goodness of someone's heart. So I'll just tell a really quick story. Right now, I'm kind of homeschooling Bryant in a lot of ways, and he's actually working on a budget project right now. And his project included having to have a certain job and what that job made annually, and then having to budget for where he was going to live, a car, and so forth and so on, food. So one of the things that he did, he had said that he wanted to be an actor, which is fine. He saw the salary, and then he started making his purchases. So as an actor, because acting is hit or miss, and some people don't make it right away, and there are some years where you have better years than others. And so as an actor, he was making a salary, and he could afford a 1-bedroom apartment. Nothing wrong with that. He could afford a scooter. And so that made him, he said, well, this is not really how I want to live. So it made him shift what he wanted to do, because he said, well, I haven't even eaten yet and I'm almost out of money. So it just gave him, and I said, it's fine if you want to be an actor, but I think just that lesson there gave him some perspective, and he decided to shift. He said, well, I really like helping people, and I really like working with children. And so, I think I'll change my mind. I can act on the side, and I want to be a pediatrician. Mm-hmm. And so then he started looking at how the differences between his lifestyle and what he wanted to live, and he decided he liked that one better. And so it's nothing wrong with one profession over the other, but the point was he is getting educated at an early age on what it takes to be a homeowner, what it takes to be fiscally responsible, what it takes to budget, and how, nobody uses checkbooks anymore, but in your checkbook, you used to have where you subtracted an amount when you wrote out a check. You subtracted that from your balance, and it really helped kind of keep you on track. And now that everybody uses their debit, their ATM, their credit cards, people have kind of lost sight of that. And so that was just a little quick story. I think education is very key. For me, knowing that it's only by grace go I, but that sometimes even if you're scared, it's important that you do take that risk if it's an educated risk, and that you're not afraid to ask questions. I'm one who asks a lot of questions, and I remember in buying our home, I didn't actually think we could buy it. And my husband was like, you know what, let's go to an open house. And so we went to an open house, and the agent there said, well, I want you to talk to, my lender. And we did, and it turns out, oh, wow, we can get approved. And I was shocked. And I once you're approved, usually they say that that's the hardest part of the real estate process. And for us, you know, it actually wasn't as hard as we thought it was going to be. But then we needed to find a house, you know, and our first house that we were in escrow with didn't appraise. And so we didn't want to pay the value in between the appraisal and the asking price. So, you know, I think you just have to take a risk and then be patient and make sure that you have your finances together as much as you can, because even though the market has been cooling off in certain areas, particularly in the area where I live and in certain other areas, it's a hotbed of activity. And so if you have yourself together and you know what you're looking for and you've prayed about it, and everything will fall into place. And that's just kind of what's happening. You know, things are falling into place. I don't question it. I just kind of go with it. But that's pretty much my advice. Or
If I can just interject, I appreciate Teresa's testimony, but Kelly made a good point about having your money work for you. You know, a lot of people believe their house is an asset, but the definition of an asset is something that makes money for you. The thing with buying a house or purchasing a house, you have to put money into it. I'm talking about maintenance, utilities, mortgage, and stuff like that. But once you you know, you can have your house and then other properties work for you. I think that's the incentive and that's the goal, is try to have your money work for you instead of you having to work for money. You know what I mean? So having a house is good and all, but like Kelly said, you wanna have your money work for you, and that's the next level.
and
We'll get to that later.
I totally agree with you. I think that that's the reason why once you have your house, it's important to continue to make upgrades and do things that will increase your value, so you do have that equity so that you can make it work for you and do other things. My goal is always to, you know, to try to have multiple properties so that you have a legacy to pass on to your kids and teaching them how to do it for themselves. And so I do believe in making improvements and trying to see, well, how can you make it work for you? But if you don't have property, you don't have that opportunity, and that's a missed opportunity.
And you're absolutely right. And see, the problem with the past generation is we've been taught to work for somebody else instead of investing in yourself and, you know, owning your own business and just ownership instead of just investing in somebody else's vision. You know what I mean? But like I said, we can talk about that later.
We are definitely gonna have another conversation. Patricia, you want to share your story? Your financial freedom?
Well, I have been working forever, as everyone knows. I've retired from a lot of jobs, and I just have to stay busy. But I have discovered, now that I'm 62 and plus, that I can have financial freedom by using my home as that, and the equity, of course, in my home. And I've gotten a reverse mortgage. So I am holding on to, I'm living in my house. I don't have any more payments. I do have to pay tax and insurance, but I get ready to leave my home, then I can decide, do I pay this mortgage off? Do my children decide that they're going to pay it off and obtain the home, or what? I have options now. And it feels really good to do what I want to do because I don't have my mortgage anymore. So I know, Judson, that's against your whole concept of home ownership, but there it is. That's my approach.
Yeah. Well, thanks for sharing. And I think that's really the key to it all, is that we all have a different success story that we're sharing, and that we are where we're at right now based on the decisions that we've made, and mostly based on real estate. As Khalid had stated as well, is that you can also use your cash your other means of money for it to generate income for you. So that's really the key to it all, is that all of us had some sort of plan one way or the other, right? Either I planned it indirectly, God gave me the path, but at the end of the day, I'm following some sort of formula. And now I am feeling that financial freedom, and financial freedom means different things for different people, right? So I want to thank you all, and I would love to have another conversation, because when we're dealing with education and we're dealing with finances, I love the story with your son, Teresa, because one of the things we did is he had a little check card, and his allowance was put on his check card every 2 weeks, because we got paid every 2 weeks. He got paid every 2 weeks, right? What we learned is that we had a board, and if something didn't get done or something get done, we go -1, +1. So you got, you did good in school, +2, -1. You took out the trash, didn't take out the trash. So at the end of the 2 weeks, he would have to add up the dollars, whether he made money that 2 weeks or he lost the money because he didn't do what he had to do. So it's kind of interesting how, now he's a man, and how his perspective on money is based on some of the lessons that were taught, because he was also given that kind of exercise in what do you want to be, because we weren't taught that, right? We, right, luckily survived high school, went to college, but where's your, now I think we've learned to teach people about money, right? And as you mentioned about having a family meeting, right? Good, bad, or indifferent. Here we are in a pandemic. Most families, if they don't have it by themselves, they're pulling resources together, hopefully, right? So that each of those families, each of those generations can make it through the pandemic. And for those individuals and families like you who had a plan and are still able to maintain, right? In COVID, right? You have a different level of stress you have to contend with, but at least you don't have that additional stress that you had mentioned before about some families who are losing their homes, or if you're renting, how they're being evicted out of their homes. So again, thank you so much for your success as we all get through this pandemic. And I definitely would love to have another conversation where pointing at more of what philosophies and strategies can you have, right, to pull money out if you choose to then invest it into something else, or do you take those other types of assets, right, and utilize them to help you generate income. Thank you so much. It was a pleasure. I look forward to seeing you guys again. Thank you. Anybody want to add anything?
Thank
Yeah,
you.
we most definitely have to do this again, because
I had heard
I was late to all the questions.
Let me
What happened to it?
unmute. There
Did you hear me, Kathy?
No, yeah.
No, I said we most definitely have to do this again, because I was late to all the questions.
Okay. Anybody else want to add anything?
Well, the question was telling your story.
What we can do next time, Patricia, is you can then email and say, hey, what questions would you like to cover? And then we'll just have a couple of conversations, because this is really good information, one for us and for us to share with others.
It's a good
That
team.
was good. It was very good.
And I got a question. What do you guys think about cryptocurrency?
Oh, that's
We'll put that on the list.
No, Nolan, no.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with you. If it's too easy, it's probably not good. You know what I mean? It's nothing free.
Exactly.
It's nothing free. It's nothing
Right.
free.
But you're right. I actually own some crypto, and I've made money off of it, but you have to be extremely, extremely, extremely careful of it. And if you don't have the extra money, I wouldn't do it at all. At all. It's like basically playing the lottery. So I wouldn't advise it.
Yeah, right, Khalid? You have to trend it. You have to trend it.
Yeah.
Where it's at now is totally different.
Yes, it's not a good time right now.
You can email the group and say, hey, what topics would you like to cover? To get all the questions and topics in, and then we'll try to sort it out and do it that way. Okay?
Will do. Thank you, everyone. We love you. Enjoy.
Thank you.
Enjoy your evening.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.